What is ASMR? Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response, ASMR, is a tingling or static-like sensation that some people experience in response to specific audio or visual stimuli. It's often described as a pleasant feeling of relaxation, calm, or sleepiness. People of Reddit, what is your downright scariest real-life story? Story 1, posted by Issa Merkel.
I used to sleepwalk when I was a child. We lived in a rough neighborhood, Decatur, Georgia, and I would wake up outside in the middle of the night, not knowing how I got there, and would have to walk home and walk into the darkened doorway I had left wide open for whoever might be lurking around. However, the time that scared me the most was when I was about 9 years old. I woke up and found myself with the bedroom curtains drawn back and staring out the window. As I came awake, I noticed a very large and completely hairless man, no hair, eyebrows, etc., staring at me and slowly inching closer to the window and closer to my face. He was looking bewildered, like he wasn't sure what he was seeing. At that moment, I realized what was going on, and I started screaming uncontrollably, frozen in place and peeing down my leg. The man freaked out and screamed, did a tumbling move, and then ran off in a weird zigzag like he was trying to dodge bullets. My mom woke up and thought I probably had a nightmare. The next morning we found a screwdriver on the front porch and damage to the door jamb and door handle. I still just about pee my pants when I tell that story, but now it is usually from laughing. I will never forget the look on his face when I started coming to life and screaming, or his high-pitched scream, or his duck and roll and dodging and bobbing all the way down the street.
Thank you, Issa Merkel, for the story. Story 2, posted by Fubar Is My Life.
I always parked in a certain spot at my last job for 12 years that I was there. It was accessible to the public as it wasn't company parking, but they wanted us to park in the back of the lot so the closer spots could be available for customers. One day, my spot's taken by a dark-tinted caddy, and I'm immediately pissed because everyone knows it's mine. It's morning shift, so 4 a.m., so it can't be one of the others because I know what they drive. So, newbie? Or maybe another employee from another shop in the plaza. It's still there on my lunch break, and when I go home and the next day I come in at 1 p.m. till close. Around 9:30, and then also the next. Something about it really bothered me. It smelled wrong. Literally, it's the South and high summer, and who knows what's baking in there. My dad was a Marine then, a police officer. He always said if you feel something is wrong, there probably is. So I dialed the non-emergency contact police number. I felt like an idiot, but every time I walked by, it bugged me. South, I was stuck waiting for over an hour before anyone shows, and honestly, if I hadn't been off the next day would have been like, F it. But I waited, mostly because I can be really a petty SOB, and that's my spot, damn it. The police show, all annoyed because who knows how many "they can't park here" calls they get. They run the license plate though, and then things go crazy. They want my info, want me to contact my manager, does this lot have cameras, have I touched the car, etc. Apparently, the car is on Amber Alert as the last sighting of a missing person who was a minor. A 15-year-old girl. When they pop the trunk, they find her dead, mutilated body under a blanket and the source of the smell. She had gone out with her much older, controlling, and insecure boyfriend, but had decided to get out of the relationship. She only made the mistake of getting into the car with him. He drove 3 counties over after torturing her, stuffing her in there and who knows what else, then parked and walked away, left her to die in the trunk. I never learned her time of death, so it haunts me, sometimes thinking she might have been saved if I'd made a fuss earlier. So, yeah, listen to your gut, even if it seems petty.
Thank you for the story. Fubar is my life. Story 3 by Amemba the Tremolo.
Late 80s to early 90s in Northern Ireland. I was a kid of around 7 or 8. The sun was shining, and it was sometime in the early afternoon. My dad needed to return a library book in the Crumlin Road, a Protestant loyalist area in Belfast. We were Catholics, and the Crumlin Road was notoriously dangerous at the time, still is to a lesser extent. So, I was already a little on edge, just knowing the reputation of the place. My dad was cool though, didn't seem worried or anything. It's not like we have Catholic printed on our foreheads. He did say, however, that I had to pretend to have a different name if anyone asked me. My name is one which marks you as a Catholic, so I adopted a Protestant name for the trip. We came to a road which led to an intersection, across which was a predominantly Catholic Republican enclave called the Ardoyne Road. We were headed to the right, down a long winding path, but further up the road ahead, towards the intersection, we could see a group of men. One of them was running back and forth across the road, relaying information between two pockets of people. Some were staring across the road towards the Catholic area. Some were talking to a man in a parked but running car. One in particular stuck out. He had long hair and a leather jacket and was very tall, at least compared to the other men. It all looked suspicious, even to me as a child, although I didn't know why. But my dad's demeanour changed to a more serious and quiet one, and I took it as confirmation that we weren't safe. He was from Belfast. We were living in a town outside of Belfast at the time, and grew up when things were at their worst here. So, he knew the ropes, and knew the signs that something was happening. We weren't walking towards the men, so it wasn't a problem. We crossed to the right, and started walking away. This is when a woman approached us. She was middle-aged, with short red hair. She saw us coming, and made a purposeful beeline towards us. She seemed preoccupied, nervous. She started grilling my dad immediately, asking who he was and where he was coming from. She was talking in a, I'm trying my best to sound casual, but I'm failing manner. I could feel my entire body beginning to boil with fear, and I felt as though I was mere moments away from being discovered. It was like a horror movie where someone finds themselves in a small town where everyone is in a cult or something, and they're trying to blend in, but are drawing suspicion and are losing themselves in an ever-increasing paranoia. I suddenly had visions of my dad getting shot and me screaming over his corpse, maybe even getting shot myself despite being a child. The longer my dad and the woman talked, the more I was starting to lose the ability to hear, as though my head was underwater. I was holding my dad's hand, and I was struggling to keep a grip because of the sweat pumping out of my palm. I didn't know how or why, but something primal in me recognized that we were in serious danger. It was clear that she was a part of whatever was going on around the corner, and was trying to manage and analyze the flow of foot traffic, especially that of strangers like us. Given that she and us were the only people on the street, she had been doing a good job. She was fishing hard for information and on the other side was a row of houses. It felt like we were walking deeper into danger, and that we had only two routes of escape: keep going or turn back the way we came. About part way down the road, we realised we were being followed. My dad told me to run ahead and check that the library was opened, and I hesitated. He said it was okay and to just go and check. I glanced over my shoulder. It was the man in the leather jacket with the long hair. I did what my dad wanted and ran ahead, heart pounding and ears pricked, awaiting the crack of gunfire. I checked the door was opened and I ran back up. As I was coming back, I saw that the man in the leather jacket had turned and was making his way back up the road. My dad looked unfazed, but was walking with a certain rigidity, like something had happened in the time it took me to run to the library and back again, and he hadn't quite unclenched his fists yet. He said it was okay and we were safe. I asked about the man following us. He said he sent me ahead, and when I was a safe distance away, he stopped and turned around to face him, ready for whatever happened. He said he was expecting violence, but as he turned around, the leather jacket dude immediately put his head down, turned, and walked back the way he came. My dad watched him for a few seconds, and then started making his way back towards me. That afternoon, within the hour we were there, a Catholic taxi driver was murdered in that street. The vibes that something terrible was going to happen were justified, and I've never felt as terrified as I did that day. When the news about the taxi driver was on TV that night, I knew I had seen the planning of a murder, and I knew we had walked into the middle of it. I could probably have identified both the woman and the leather jacket man had I been asked about them by the police, but that was never going to happen. No way my dad would have volunteered himself, and therefore me, to the cops to be a witness against a terrorist cell. Edit 2 years later, found out from my dad that it wasn't the Shankill Road, but the Crumlin Road. Corrected the post accordingly.
Thank you, Remember the Tremolo, for the story. Story 4, posted by Blackcat 1206.
I have cerebral palsy, but I have always worked while at and after leaving college, sometimes having 2 or 3 jobs at a time. When this incident happened, I was 22, renting my bungalow and living alone. I was going to work. My main job at the time was as a dance, fitness, and play therapy assistant to a group of therapists working for young people with physical, learning disabilities, and extreme behavior disorders. As I'm a full-time wheelchair user, I had to use a cab to travel to and from work. And although most of the guys driving for the cab firm were solid and really nice, there were a few dodgy ones, as in most walks of life. I could transfer quite easily, so all the drivers had to do was hold my wheelchair steady, then fold it up, and then put it in the boot. On this day, the guy turned up at 8:30 a.m. late. I proceeded to transfer. I felt him right up close behind me. His hand brushed lightly over my back and bottom. It's worth mentioning that I had slight issues with this man before, mostly making smutty remarks got slightly nasty, and I ended up having to report it to the firm. As I'm disabled, there wasn't much I could do as I was holding myself up, and I couldn't let go of the door. I swore at him managing to swing around to sit in the car and told him never to do that. He just laughed and smirked. We started to drive. 10 minutes in, I noticed we weren't going the regular route to get to the center where I worked. Being angry, and also the fact that I was already late for work, I asked him about this. He ignored my questions and said in a cold voice, "You know I live around here. I could take you to my flat where my 3 mates are, and there wouldn't be anything you could do about it." When he said this, I was crapping myself inside, but I said in my bravest voice, "If I'm much later, work will call me and they have your firm's details too." With that, he scowled at me big time, and after a while, I soon recognized the usual route to work. When I arrived at work, my boss was worried. He saw the driver, who he didn't have time for either, ask me if I was okay. After a while, I was able to tell my supervisor what had happened, and she first called the cab firm and then the police, who came to interview me at work and then talked to the man. I don't know what happened to him, but I never saw him again.
Thank you, Black Cat 1206. Honorable mention. Story 5. Just some guy in a desert.
I was 11 or 12 years old. I was walking down the street, maybe 2 blocks from my house. On my street, I lived in a town in the hills just outside of a city that had a lot of gang-related violence. My town was maybe 15 minutes away from gang territory. As I'm walking next to an 8 to 10 foot retaining wall that held up someone's front yard and house foundation, I hear a loud shout of "FKU motherfucker." As I look back, I see the barrel of a rifle sticking out of a car window as this car is driving towards me. I froze. I couldn't run or anything. I just stood there knowing I'm about to die. I hear 2 soft bursts, and the car drives off. I'm alive and shaking. Then after a few seconds, I look at the wall next to me and I see 2 places where the paintballs splattered on the wall. Yup, I was shot at with paintballs. But for those few seconds, I thought I was gonna die. I didn't call the cops or tell anyone but friends. But apparently I wasn't the only one they did this to, and someone called the cops
Thank you, Justin Deza, and thank you for watching. This is my first ever video, so if you recommend something, let me know. See you next time.